Anyway, so great to see you all again. I'm Bhavana. I'm going to give you a brief history of cryptography, and in the process, we'll cover how much ever we can. This talk will be at a very high level. I won't go too much into the technical depth, but we'll see how far we get, and hopefully you will get a flavor for what cryptography is by the end of the talk. Okay, so first of all, am I audible to people in the back row? Am I too loud for people in the front row? Okay, and all of you can see the slides, right? Otherwise, we can change the lighting and things like that. Great. Okay, so let's start the history with what happened in the World War era. I'm sorry, there's something wrong with the resolution, so I can't see the entire slide. There's a part of the slide that's cut off. Yeah, but it should not be cut off, right? Okay, never mind. Okay, fine, let's... Never mind, it's fine. Okay, never mind. When you record, you can delete all of this stuff from the video. Okay, so let's start with the World War era, right? So in the pre-World War era, as you know, people were trying to communicate securely for a really long time, much before the World War even began. And we had all of these ciphers that some of you might have heard of, Caesar, Vernum, which is what is one-time passwords that we know of, one-time pad that we know of now. So the goal of trying to do secure communication is hardly something that evolved from computer science or electronics even, right? It happens every day that you want to talk something that somebody else doesn't understand. Maybe you want to say something that your parents don't understand, who knows, right? So it's the order of the day. But one of the key highlights was Alan Turing, and he did cryptanalysis to break the Enigma machine, and that's something that really made people understand that by giving this a mathematical structure, by understanding the structure behind ciphers, you could potentially exploit loopholes, right? So that was, Alan Turing's main contribution, in the sense that it also reduced the duration of the World War by several years. And so Alan Turing did not directly write papers in cryptography, but around the same time that Alan Turing was doing the work that he was, Claude Shannon, who's the father of information theory, he met Alan Turing and he got interested in some of the things that Alan Turing said, and one of the seminal works in cryptography on the one-time pad encryption was written as a paper by Claude Shannon. And in that paper, Claude Shannon explored this concept called information theoretic cryptography. If time permits, we'll talk about information theoretic cryptography and its differences from computational, cryptography. Anyway, so he was an information theorist, and so that's how you could talk about it as the start of cryptography, or the formal study of cryptography in some sense. And around the same time that all of this was happening, there was a very important revolution that was taking place in the field of theory of computation. All of you would have taken a course by now in theory of computation, and in particular, Manuel Blum, Stephen Cook, Leonid Levin, Richard Karp, have you read about them in your textbooks? Most of them at least, right? Manuel Blum wanted to understand the complexity of various computations. So this was in the 1960s, when computers were already used, they were already being used in businesses. And people were trying to understand what it means for some task to take a certain amount of time, what defines how efficiency, what defines complexity of various computations, and so on. And Manuel Blum actually put forth various axioms which are now known as Blum Axioms, which talk about precisely this. It gives us a notion of complexity in terms of the number of steps it runs, a task runs for. And Manuel Blum is actually a visionary and has, a Turing Award winner, and he's contributed far more as well to computer science, to theoretical computer science specifically, and we'll talk about him in a bit. But around the same time, Stephen Cook and Leonard Levin were doing some very fascinating work. How many of you know the Cook-Levin Theorem? Have you, if you've taken a course on theory of computation, do you use SIPSA? Which book do you use? Sorry? Hopcroft. Okay. Okay, never mind. But you are familiar with complexity theory to some extent? Yes, no? I need answers. No. No? Which year of your undergraduate studies are you in? Yeah. Third year. But you're familiar with theory of computation and Turing machines and Turing reductions and so on. Okay, good. Okay, so let me just tell you a little bit about these people. So Stephen Cook in 1971, he formulated problems in terms of P and NP, and actually the Cook-Levin theorem actually, have you heard of SAT? Right, and what is the speciality about SAT? What is NP completeness? Okay, what is NP? Right, but, okay, what is NP complete? What does reducible mean? Okay, what does reducible mean? Okay, you can give him a prize at the end of. Okay, good. So, good. So, what Cook and Levin did was to show that SAT is an NP complete problem. So, what are NP complete problems? If you have a solution to any problem which is NP complete, then you can actually use that to find a solution to any other problem in NP, in the class NP. So in the world of complexity theory, we already started having a very nice structure. We understood different complexity classes, and we also understood what we did not understand, right? So you know that the P versus NP problem is, a very famous problem. If you solve it, forget about your PhD, you'll get so much more than that. It's one of the biggest open problems, but in some sense, the goal of complexity theory, at that point of time, was to do these kinds of characterizations and study various complexity classes. And for those of you who aren't familiar with NP, a good example is Sudoku. How many of you have seen the Sudoku puzzle? Right? Now, great, all of you, excellent. So you know what NP completeness is. So if someone gives you the Sudoku puzzle and gives you a solution to the Sudoku puzzle, then you'll be able to verify that it actually satisfies. There are some constraints. You have a 3x3 grid, and there are some constraints, or 9x9 grid, and there are some constraints that it needs to satisfy. So anyone, even I, can actually verify that it's actually true. I know Sudoku is hard because my mom solved Sudoku better than me. So there must be some difficulty there. But more precisely, it's actually an NP complete problem, right? Because there are a lot of solutions that you could possibly try, and it's may not be easy to come up with a solution, but it's easy to verify that a solution exists. Now, and all of this was very fascinating. So Manuel Blum, Stephen Cook, they both won Turing Awards for their respective contributions. Leonard Levin did the same work that Cook did, but he did not get a Turing Award. Any idea why? Well, actually, I don't know about why he didn't get a Turing Award, but Cook solved the same problem 2 years before Levin. But we still give him credit. We still give Levin credit. Any idea why? Have you heard of the Cook-Levin theorem? How many of you have heard of it? Okay, Good, some of you have heard of it. So if you haven't, go back to your textbooks or find a textbook. Michael Sipser covers it. So go back to the textbook and take a look at it, right? So Leonid Levin was doing his research, conducting his research in Russia at that point of time. And that was the period of the Cold War. So even though this work by Stephen Cook was done before, Leonid Levin did it sort of independently because he had no idea about the work that was going on in the US. In fact, what I've heard is that Leonid Levin actually had this thesis much before, but he was trying to get even better results and then publish his result. So because of the Cold War, people did not know about Levin's work. Levin is now in the US. Okay, so there was all of this beautiful theory, and then comes along Richard Karp, and he actually took this characterization into P versus NP and came up with a list of 21 problems which are NP complete, right? So the theory of computation world was progressing really well. There was fascinating research that was going on, and people understood that there may be problems which are inherently harder than other problems, right? Okay, so around the same time in the crypto world, people were trying to still solve the problem of communicating securely. And this was in the mid-70s. And the fascinating thing that happened, if someone comes and tells you that, this problem is actually very difficult to solve, it will take forever for us to get results if we try to run the computation, and so on and so forth, we would view it as a negative, right? We would view it as some limitation. But what these amazing cryptographers managed to do is to actually take this negative, put a positive spin on it, and said, aha, if it's a problem which cannot be solved, then I'm going to use it for secure computation, as a communication. Why? If there is some reason why a machine cannot solve it, that means someone who's trying to intercept the communication, an adversary who's trying to intercept the communication, can actually not solve the problem either, and therefore can I use this inherent dichotomy to actually achieve something useful, right? And the pioneering work in this, as I'd mentioned during the panel discussion as well, was by Diffie, Hellman, and Merkle, who considered the following problem. Let's say you walk into a room and you announce that, let's say I walk into the room and I announce that I'm Bhavana Kanukurthi and I have some public key of mine, and I want a situation where any one of you can send me private messages, right? So any one of you should be able to talk to me in a secure manner. What does that mean? It means that nobody else should be able to understand, even though you're screaming your message out loud in the room. I'll be the only one who will be able to understand what you are saying, right? And if you think about it, this seems to be a very difficult task, right? It should in fact seem counterintuitive. Why should it even be possible? No idea. And what many people would have seen as a negative, these people were able to spin it and actually get a positive result out of this. And that's exactly what they do. They sowed the seeds for public key cryptography in the works of Diffie, Hellman, and Merkle, right? And they formulated the problem as a key agreement problem, where two parties want to agree on a key in a settings that I described before. And Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman, at a few years, I think maybe a year after that, came up with the famous RSA algorithm, which was based on the hardness of factoring. And that was the algorithm for encryption that they had proposed. And as you know, RSA is very widely used. And it was, the beauty of RSA is that it is, of all of these algorithms, it's that it's so way ahead of its times. And if you think about it, you can look at the work, the body of work that's gone on up until this point and say, okay, so their contribution is that they've given an encryption scheme, right? Now, from a point of view, you may say, okay, it's just one algorithm, a pair of encryption and decryption algorithms, and that's all there is to it. But if you think of how it's actually transformed the world that we live in, it's because you have secure encryption algorithms that, e-commerce has flourished, and a lot of the advancement that we see in computer science today is because there are businesses out there that are interested in the e-commerce, because we have secure e-commerce, there are businesses out there who want faster computers and so on and so forth, right? So it's trickle-down progress in a way that's somewhat unprecedented, and you don't even know who to attribute it to. And as I also mentioned before, some of the points that I'll make now go back to the panel discussion we had before. Remember I mentioned Leonard Adleman, that he doesn't do cryptography anymore. So I looked up, and he very specifically does DNA computing, and he's considered to be the father of DNA computing. So he doesn't work in the field that he won his Turing Award for, right? That's pretty phenomenal. Now, I'm sorry about the things that are cut off on the other side, but it's not too important, so it's okay. Okay, so an important breakthrough that took place after RSA came along was that Silvio Micali and Shafi Goldwasser, who somewhat recently won the Turing Award as well. Sorry, how many of you have heard of the Turing Award? Okay, good. Everyone, pretty much everyone. But for those of you who don't know, the Turing Award is considered the Nobel Prize of computer science, right? Good. So Shafi Goldwasser and Silvio Micali actually came up with some fascinating work, which addressed at its heart a very simple question. The paper starts with, what is a secret, right? And then it put forth a definition of public key encryption. Now, this is something that I would like all of you to think about. How do you define encryption? When I say encryption, all of you know that informally, it means that I should be able to do secure communication, right? So you know that that's what it should give you. But how do you define a secure encryption scheme? Any thoughts? What does it mean to define it? Any idea? Good. What does it mean to say that only the receiver can decrypt it? So you're telling me the procedure, right? So when you say the receiver will have something, that's the procedure that the receiver will run. That there exists a procedure, I am willing to give you. Fine. Yeah? What does that mean? So the receiver, okay, so there exists a receiver who knows how to decrypt it. That is knowledge of the procedure, that's fine. One sec. No, that is true. One sec. Yeah. No, so the fact that the encryptor can encrypt and decryptor can decrypt, I give that to you for free. I'm telling you already. Okay, so one person says they should, sorry, what's your name? Anushri. Anushri. Okay, so Anushri says they shouldn't be able to decipher it and they shouldn't be able to tamper with the message. That's the same as saying the receiver should be able to. Okay, so one last answer and then we'll. Okay, so you're all giving me a lot of answers which ultimately boil down to he should not be able to decrypt the ciphertext. So there is no polynomial time. So, okay, good. So I think, so what you're giving me is the intuition, and understandably you're giving me the intuition and not the definition, because it's very tough to come up with definitions for such an interactive process, right? So, okay, so let's actually talk about something different, right? So when I was at a talk recently, I was asked to specify that, what are the 5 attributes that you can think of for a smart city? If you had to come up with, some attributes that a smart city should have, what are those attributes? This is a question that's nothing to do with computer science. Any suggestions? Okay. Sorry? Traffic management, infrastructure, okay. Security, sorry, what? You have to be louder, I can't hear. No human? Okay, fine, all that is fine. But if I want to name some plan as a good plan, what are the features? I'm not talking about how to get those features, right? What are the, Okay, you need security, what else? Okay, you need energy saving, fine. Okay, so the reason I'm asking you all this is that if you look at a smart city, you're able to specify what the requirements are. If you look at an urban setting as this, you're actually saying you need good transportation, you need good infrastructure, you need all of these things, right? So you're actually able to specify all of the parameters that you need from a smart city. Now, the process of trying to come up with a security definition is actually, the process is not similar, I'm sorry, but the end goal is actually very similar. Your system has some parameters that it needs to satisfy. For the particular application that you need, you have some parameters that it needs to satisfy, and you need to come up with a correct and a complete definition which captures all of your system requirements. So if I'm giving a blueprint for a smart city, I will actually have to give a complete methodology of what all I'm going to incorporate in my smart city. I have to come up with a blueprint that others can understand, a blueprint that can potentially be extendable if someone wants to make modifications, right? So a cryptography definition should be like that. So if you take the example of encryption, it should be a definition that I can actually explain to somebody, and it should be a complete definition which captures all of your system requirements. Now, when you talk about encryption, I said it should allow for secure communication, right? What does secure communication mean? It means that only the receiver, only the decryptor, person who has the decryption keys, should be able to decrypt the message, and no one else should be able to decrypt it, right? So Shafi and Silvio formalized this by the notion of semantic security. Now, what does semantic security, what is the definition? What does it say? That given any 2 messages and the ciphertext, no one can tell apart which message the ciphertext corresponds to, right? And you're allowing the adversary to pick those 2 messages. So it can be any 2 messages that are chosen by the adversary. So you can think of it as a game. So I am the adversary, I give you 2 messages, you encrypt it and give me back one of the 2 messages, and we'll play a game. I'll try and guess, looking at the ciphertext, which of the 2 messages it corresponds to. And if I guess correctly, I win, otherwise I lose, right? So what is the probability roughly that you want? Half, right? Half anyone can do by simply guessing at random. So of course you also have to give me the ciphertext at random, otherwise it does not make any sense to do it, right? So one of Silvio's and Shafi's most important contributions is coming up with rigorous definitions. So all of the, up until Silvio and Shafi came up with their paper on, probabilistic encryption, there were no formal definitions for what security actually means. All we knew were vague statements that we intuitively understood, but that intuition is not good enough. In cryptography, you need a formal definition and a proof that whatever protocol, whatever algorithm you design actually satisfies that definition. So someone should be able to verify that it actually meets that definition. So that's very important. And the entire field has developed into a very rich field, primarily because of this contribution. And what's interesting is that this was work done during their PhD. This was their PhD thesis, right? Okay. Now, around the time that people were talking about complexity, there was one other very important measure, which was randomness. Quite often, the complexity of a task had some connections to the randomness that was used in solving that problem. And if you take the case of cryptography itself, you talk about people having various keys, right? These keys have to be random, correct? If the key is not random, what is the opposite? What is the complete opposite of not being random? It's known, right? It's deterministic. No, you don't use any randomness. It's like a constant function can generate that message, right? There's no randomness at all. And that's clearly not good. So you need some notion of randomness. And the point is, what do you use to get this randomness? You're using something from your machine, you're using some algorithm to generate this randomness for you, because you're not going to flip 1,000 bits, right? You're not going to flip a coin that's 1,000 bits long. So you're using some procedure to generate this randomness. So then comes the question of, you're using a procedure to generate this randomness. So what does it even mean for something to be random? Is that clear? Is that something we can answer? Yeah? Okay, fine. So let me put a spin on it and say, if we run this procedure again and it keeps giving me the same output, then I know that it's not random. But just because it's not doing that, it doesn't mean it's random, right? Sorry? The output shouldn't follow any pattern. Okay, that's actually, so these are all, good answers. So the output shouldn't follow any pattern, which means that if I run a test, I shouldn't be able to tell whether you use that test to say that it's random or it's not random, right? Okay, so when you're generating randomness from a procedure, when you're generating these numbers, random numbers from some procedure, it's not going to give you complete randomness because it's actually a procedure, right? You're collecting some information about mouse movements or something like that to generate this random. It's not going to give you pure randomness. What it's going to give you are pseudo-random numbers. So Manuel Blum, Silvio Micali, and Andy Yao contributed a great deal to our understanding of what randomness actually is, what pseudo-randomness actually is. And Andy Yao put forth a beautiful definition which said that if something is random, then it should be the case that if something is pseudo-random, then it should be the case that no matter what test you do, typically how do you check whether something satisfies some property or not? You run tests, right? What test do you run? We have no idea. No matter what test you run, no matter what polynomial time test you run, you shouldn't be able to tell whether it was the output of this procedure or whether it was the output of flipping random coins. Right? So he gave this beautiful notion for understanding what randomness was, and Silvio Micali and Manuel Blum built pseudo-random generators based on number theoretic assumptions. Again, the beauty in all of this is that when you look at pseudo-random numbers, when you look at pseudo-random generators, like with everything else in cryptography, they exploit this dichotomy, right? The dichotomy that hardness of a problem gives you. And how do they do that? They say that it's, easy to generate if you have the seed. But for someone who doesn't have the seed for generating this pseudo-random outputs, this output is going to look computationally indistinguishable. So it's going to be hard for any polynomial time adversary to tell whether it's the output of a random process or the output of the pseudo-random generator. So it very beautifully links computational complexity with the ability for a system to actually generate randomness, right? And so I think, if you think about it from the point of view of how people may have come up with these results, I think the beauty of it is that you realize how much insight and intuitive understanding you need to be able to tie complexity together with feasibility of doing some of the task. And that's really fascinating, right? Okay. Now, we'll fast forward a little bit. So after all that progress, Silvio Micali and Shafi Goldwasser, together with Charlie Rakoff, put forth the theory of zero knowledge proofs. Has anyone heard of zero knowledge proofs? Okay, let's take some answers from you out there. Yeah? Whole procedure, okay. That's an application. Okay. Okay, fine. So I'm actually going to give you the answer, right? So I'm going to talk. We don't want to talk about in terms of keys. We want to talk about in terms of a language. So let's actually step back from zero knowledge proofs and talk about something slightly different. What is a proof? As you studied in school, what is a proof? Louder.
We have in the statement, by using some steps, we are trying to prove that the statement is valid.
Okay, and in particular, fine, that's a slightly vague thing, but what you want to say is that if you have a statement, you can arrive at the statement from a series of axioms, right? Axioms are things which you widely believe is true. The formal definition of a proof is that you should be able to go from axioms using the rules of logic to the statement, and then it's actually a true statement, right? Good. So that makes the process of proving something non-interactive, right? So if I write down a proof, anyone with a basic knowledge of these axioms or mathematics will be able to verify these proofs. Now, these people in their paper put forth a beautiful theory of interactive proofs. So what they study is the following. So when textbook proofs that you read are all non-interactive in nature. What power does interaction give me? People were studying what power does randomness give me, right? So this is something similar. What power does interaction give me? If a prover and verifier talk to each other, will they be able to prove more statements than otherwise, right? And it's a very interesting question to ask. And this work, so the question that actually asks this work only pertains to interactive proofs, but zero knowledge proofs are a specific class of interactive proofs where you do not even reveal the witness. You only reveal the validity of the statement. So for instance, if you take a language that's in NP, if I have a statement with a witness, I can just ship it to you, I can give you the witness, and you'll be able to verify that the proof is true, right? Because you know that you have an NP relation, and it's going to be one whenever it's actually true. So that's easy. So if you have a statement in NP, you can actually give even a non-interactive proof for it. But with interaction, can you prove statements which are not even in NP, right? And it turns out to be a very powerful complexity class. And now zero knowledge proofs ask even more challenging question, even more counterintuitive question, which is, can I prove statements without giving the witness away? Or more formally, can I prove statements where the person who is getting the proof learns nothing except for whether the statement is actually true or false? Because that you have to learn. If you want the statement, if you want the proof to be correct, then we want the verifier to learn that the statement is actually true, right? I should be able to prove it to you. But other than that, can we make sure he doesn't learn anything else? Now, so this brings me to a question. Can you prove that color exists to a colorblind person? Am I making sense? Can you prove that color exists to a person who's colorblind? Can you prove it without any, actually, you have any idea how to prove this? You can talk about it for 2 seconds, that's fine. Sorry? Using? Witness, what is a witness to the existence of color? Okay, so, sorry, what is your name? Harish. Harish's suggestion is using majority. If a lot of people agree that color exists, then you can actually say. You and I both know that you cannot rely on anybody in this room, including me. So, all of us lie. So, that's not we need to live in a world, in cryptography, you need to live in a world where you can work even though everyone around you is a liar. So, that's not going to work. So, if you know the answer already, I don't want to hear from you. Yeah. If you know the answer already, I don't want to hear from you. Have you seen this before? Okay. That's what he said. So you cannot ask another person, right? You know the, okay, if you know the answer, if you've seen it before. Okay, let's actually, so I have this experiment over here, and can I have 2 volunteers who will actually prove? So I need volunteers. Yes, please. You want to volunteer? Please come forward. So gifts for these 2, prizes for these 2 for volunteering. Come forward. Yay, that was easy, right? So I'd like you to prove to her that you're not colorblind, are you? Awesome. I'd like you to prove to her that color exists. Right? So this one has green and this has red. Right? Now, can I borrow a pen? So let's say I write out 2 numbers, 2 different numbers. So the green one has a 0 and the red one has a 1, right? Other than that, they look identical. As far as you are concerned, if you're looking at these 2, other than the color, they're identical, right? Okay, now, what would you guys do? You can use interaction. What would you guys do? Sorry?
Means
I'm asking you. Okay, you can help actually. All of you can help.
But I can lie, right?
If you lie, you want to prove that color exists, right?
I want to prove.
Yeah, you want to prove that color exists. You want to prove that you can tell apart those 2 colors. So your goal is to convince her. If you lie and you get caught, you're not going to win. Okay, so yeah, let's see. What does she do? What does he do? What is one of them? How? But she doesn't know color. Right. So you need to pick one, right? So another way of doing this.
Probability is, if I'm not colorblind and then pick it with those 100% probability, if I'm colorblind, I lose that.
Right. So you can just try it once with him and ask so that everyone knows what the experiment is, right? So ask him to tell you what color it is based on the numbers. Do you remember the? So what number it is based on the colors, right? So just show him the colors. You're showing him both.
1.
Show him one, right? That's the experiment. You show him one color. You looked at both sides. Oh, I don't believe this. This guy gets nothing. No gift for you. I'm kidding. He's definitely not a reliable prover. But you can do the experiment again. You forgot the mapping? Okay, yeah. So do the experiment again so that everybody knows what your experiment is. And show him one color. Yeah, and what number is it? You're supposed...
I'll tell the number.
Yes. But do you agree that that's a good strategy?
Yes, because if I follow this, I'll be able to differentiate 100% of the time, whereas a colorblind person will be able to only differentiate 50% of the time. If performed for a multiple number of times.
Right, right. So you perform this experiment and yeah, you can go back. You perform. Thank you guys. Sorry, what are your names? Dviti and? Amin. Okay, great. Thanks. So, thanks for the enthusiastic volunteering. A round of applause for our volunteers. Yes, very good. And thanks to all of you for contributing answers. So this was a statement that you could not have imagined proving without interaction, but somehow throw in interaction and you're actually able to prove this. And if you think about it, not only is it an interactive proof, it's also a zero knowledge proof, because the person who was verifying it did not learn anything other than whether or not you know the proof, right? Whether or not you have a proof to the statement. And that's the essence behind zero knowledge proof. Actually, let me do something better. Why don't you repeat the proof so that we know whether you understood? I'm volunteering you.
It's like what will be the colorblind person? I'll be having 2 colors, red and
He can't be colorblind because he's proving to you, so he can actually tell color apart.
Okay, I'm checking whether he is colorblind or not. I'll be having two cards with you look red and green. Green is numbered as 0 and red is numbered as 1.
You can show them the cards with the two numbers.
Green and it's a 0, red and then it's a 1. Every time I just shuffle these two papers and I'll just show the color to him. And he's supposed to guess the number. If he guesses the number correctly every time, then it's like he's not colorblind. If he's not colorblind, he's a normal person. If he is a colorblind, he can't differentiate between red and green, so that the number what he guesses will be a wrong, and the probability of guessing correct answer will be
That's
a
that's a good explanation, barring the fact that even colorblind people are normal. Other than that, it's a great explanation. Nothing abnormal about being colorblind. But good. So, clear? Can someone tell me what was the need for shuffling? What is the importance of shuffling over there? Randomness, right? So you can see that not only is interaction helping over here, even the randomness is helping. So if you look at actually the definition of a zero knowledge proof, it takes into account all of this. It's a very difficult task to actually define it, right? Now, we're still sticking to 5 o'clock, like 5:10, but Jayant is talking next. You've told him, is it? I see, then it's okay. Then I could have gone a bit slower. I rushed in the initial part. Okay, good. Now, one of the, so this paper, by the way, won a Gödel Prize, and which is also, after Turing Award, it's the next award in computer science. It's awarded for specific results which are, really influential, and this work is really influential. Now, can someone tell me what might be an application in cryptography of zero knowledge proofs? Sorry? End-to-end encryption? Zero knowledge helps with encryption? He does not need to know how it's encrypted. Okay, that's actually a good question. It's actually a good observation because I'll talk a little bit about it, right? You don't like colorblind people, do you? No, we're not making a direct comparison to colorblind people anymore. We're done with that. But I'll get back to your point, right? So sorry, what is your name? Pranav. Pranav's point was that you can, the verifier doesn't need to know the encryption algorithm. How it's encrypted, the process, right? So first of all, as far as encryption itself goes, you typically assume that the algorithms are known to everybody. So the only thing that's hidden are the secrets. Yes? Okay, so he knows that it was encrypted correctly. He cannot right, but he has a proof that it was encrypted correctly, is what you're saying. Sorry, yeah? Okay. Okay, fine. What is your name? Vaishali. You're very shy to say your name. You can give Vaishali a prize at the end of it. Do you have enough prizes? Sorry? Oh, yes, please. Yeah. It's okay. Okay, good. So, where was I? Okay, so the whole point is that one of the big uses of zero knowledge proofs is that you can actually prove your identity. You can prove that you are a person who knows the identity without revealing anything else. And that's precisely the kind of application that you need in an ATM setting, right? Now, so that is zero knowledge proofs. And one of the most fascinating applications of zero knowledge proofs is to this area called secure multi-party computation. Now, as I said before, and as we've seen from, sorry, what was your name? Sorry? Yeah, provers can be very unreliable, right? They sometimes cheat. They look at both sides of the paper when they shouldn't be looking at both sides. So we cannot trust Amin at all, right? So you want to do computation. We know that we cannot trust people we're working with. So you want to do computation even in a setting when you do not trust the people you're working with. And if you think about it, it's completely, the goal is completely different from encryption, right? Where encryption, you knew who had the public key and you wanted to encrypt to him. But if you want cryptography to be really powerful, if you already trust someone, maybe you can establish the mechanism for cryptography to be really powerful. You should be able to work with people you don't trust at all and still have your privacy protected, the correctness of whatever you want to be protected, right? You still need security guarantees for yourself. And that's what multi-party computation actually gives you, right? So it allows two parties to learn some output of their inputs without revealing anything to anybody else. And so this is a really powerful primitive, and the pioneering work in this was done by Oded Goldreich, Silvio Micali, and Avi Vigderson. And Xenoknowledge proofs, where do they come in? They essentially allow you to go from any protocol which is secure only in the case of an honest party to a protocol that's secure even when you have malicious parties. Why? Because each party can somehow prove that they've done the computation correctly. So that's a lot of things I'm telling you, so be happy to take questions later. Good. So now that I've given you a very high-level overview of all the fascinating things that go on in cryptography, what is the relevant reading material? So as we already spoke about in the panel, no matter what you do, it's important to have good textbooks or good lecture notes. These days it's become very easy to get good lecture notes and good textbooks. So for theoretical computer science, you know, algorithms, theory of computation, complex theory and all. Standard books like CLRS, CIPSA, these are all very good. And if you see, I already told you about how definitions were really important in cryptography, because quite often you need to give a proof that you are doing what you've claimed to do, right? So, which makes proofs very important. And this brings me to discrete mathematics. And what does discrete mathematics cover? It also covers combinatorics and probability. And as we just saw, if you're looking at randomness, how will you understand what randomness is if you don't understand what probability is, right? The whole point, randomness, the study of randomness is founded on knowing what probability is, right? So that too is very important. And as I mentioned in the panel, we have online video lectures for discrete mathematics. This is not a replacement. It's not to be viewed like YouTube videos of Game of Thrones. You're supposed to look at it and then go back and find resources, find references that you can read further. So we also have references that you can read. And the lecture notes by Rafael Paz and Dustin Teng is also very good. Finally, number theory is another thing that's used in cryptography. Again, the Paz and Seng book is really good. Now, close to finishing my lecture, some of you might wonder, all the breakthroughs that I presented were from the 70s, right? At best, the early 80s. What about now? Do people know who he is? Sorry? There's a prize for whoever guesses his name. Sorry? You can say John Smith, it's just a guess. Sorry? I've written Craig Gentry. Oh no, no points for me then. Okay, then anything else about him? Do you know why he's... Sorry? Is there an answer? Yes. Louder. Quantum cryptography. That's a good guess, but the answer is no. It's a very good guess. Okay, so Craig Gentry had a breakthrough on this kind of encryption scheme called fully homomorphic encryption scheme. So remember when I was speaking about definitions, I said definitions should have a little bit of flexibility in them. That was one of the contributions of Silvio and Shafi's work, right? So what people started doing later was saying, are encryptions just as they are defined now, or can we define more sophisticated encryption schemes? And fully homomorphic encryption is a much more sophisticated, in some sense, form of encryption scheme, which allows you a lot more, gives you a lot more features. I'm not going to go into what those features are, but it goes back to my point about having good definitions that people can then extend to do fascinating work. Okay, now, I'm not going to say more about this, but Craig Gentry came up with a breakthrough in 2009 when he came up with the first fully homomorphic encryption scheme, never mind what it is. Now, I wanted to say something because we discussed it in the panel. What was Craig Gentry's profession before he became a cryptographer? Again, you can win points by guessing. Photographer, that's brilliant, no. Anything else? Musician, okay, so this can go on for a very long time, so let me tell you. He was a lawyer. He has a degree in law from Harvard Law School, and yeah, he was working on intellectual property, and it was at the age of 36 that he finished his doctoral dissertation. And not only did he finish his doctoral dissertation, it was on fully homomorphic encryption, and it won the ACM Doctoral Dissertation Award. So this goes back to all the misconceptions you might have about the right and wrong way to do things. Ultimately, you have someone like Craig Gentry who's dispelling all those misconceptions, right? Okay, finally, there are some really interesting things happening at ISE which you have to be familiar with. Now, I've told you about all of these people. Do you recognize the person? You're all going to get 0 points if you don't recognize the person in the second image with Silvio Micali, Professor Narahari, right? So all these Turing Award winners come to ISE often and give beautiful talks, very well attended talks. And what's interesting is that Professor Narahari has a book in his hand. Any idea what it is? No points for that, too many answers. So game theory and mechanism design. And yeah, he's gifting that to Professor Silvio Micali. Again, going back to what we discussed before, what does Silvio Micali do now? What is his research area? Sorry? No, that's Leonard Adleman. You guys are confusing with Leonard Adleman. So Silvio Micali now takes all his cryptography brilliance and he uses it in mechanism design. Right? So his primary focus is in mechanism design. Of course, he still works in cryptography and he contributes greatly to the field, but also to mechanism design. Right? So these are things that you should know. So to sum up, this was a whirlwind tour of all the key players in cryptography, and in the process, I hope you got some insight into the issues that go on when you design crypto systems. And they have beautiful work that you can actually go read, but more importantly, behind all that work, they also have beautiful life stories about how they did research. So look them up and you'll really enjoy it. Right? Thank you.
Let's all thank Ms. Bhavana again.